All right. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. I am Dr. Billings, and welcome back to Season 1, Episode 3 of our podcast. Today is a very interesting doctorate project. MTSA has a relationship with the Nurse Anesthesia Program in Guyana, and this project is aimed at targeting knowledge or content gaps for the nurses in Guyana with evidence-based methods. But first, let's have a quick introduction of our group members. The participants tonight are, so Jonathan McGarity and Shane Merrill, and I'll have you guys actually introduce yourselves and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I graduated in 2010 with a master's for nurse anesthesia and decided to kind of go back and get a completion program just kind of to do it. A buddy of mine and I were going to do independent practice here in Washington, and we just wanted to reaffirm to the surgeon group that owns the surgery center, that we were doing everything we can, get the best the most education. So just kind of a completion type program, just to kind of support them and their efforts. And it's been fun to kind of do the completion and kind of see some of the different aspects, the business aspects of anesthesia. And together with Jonathan, he has some great experience with the Guyanese nurses and nurse anesthetists. And so it's been fun to kind of learn from him a little bit about, kind of some out of the US type anesthesia and nursing.
Absolutely. Jonathan, you go ahead.
Yeah. So I've been practicing as a CRNA since 2019 and been working to try to improve a couple places where I've worked, and went back to get the doctorate just to help me become a better change agent. I'm also very interested in regional anesthesia and pain, so I added on that fellowship. I became a nurse in 2010, and I was a pediatric ICU nurse. And through that, I had the opportunity to go to Guyana twice. And the role was to teach postoperative care for pediatric cardiac surgery. So that kind of kicked off my love of Guyana and inspired me with the passion in the Guyanese nursing community. And then I was able to go back as a CRNA and teach point of care ultrasound. And I was impressed with the same feelings that this is a passionate group. And the Guyanese nurse anesthetists are very much interested in continuing to grow.
Well, that's excellent. It sounds like you were already invested before you were even a CRNA with the Guyanese group. So it's great to have you both here. So let's go ahead and start with the type of project you completed and the model you followed. Shane, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's an evidence-based project, kind of appraising the deployments and appropriateness of virtual education, specifically surrounding kind of crises of hypotension perioperatively. The project was designed to use some knowledge checks and case management to kind of teach within the module, to build upon basic physiology toward kind of helping assist the nurses into, understanding critical thinking and application of chemistry and physics for their populations.
Absolutely. Well, what's nice about the different models out there is the framework and the tools it provides to complete the evidence-based project. We took the initial step of forming the teams and groups, so nobody really had to make those decisions. So let's start with how you searched the literature for your project. Were there any terms or techniques that you found especially helpful? And did you have to resort to beyond just a database search? Jonathan, you want to touch on that?
Yeah. So first of all, we have to give a lot of credit to Lonnie Hensel. As part of her DNA project, she established a foundation for ours. She did two things, and one being a robust literature search looking at the effectiveness of simulation training in low resource countries, and she found it a positive effect. So the very consistent literature showing that. We repeated her search study just to check for any updated literature, and we screened 4 articles, but none of them met inclusion criteria. So we are sticking with the same literature search that she used. In terms of going outside of the database, we definitely did that. And, we did use some gray literature, and then a big part of it during my last trip to Guyana to do the POCUS training was also just kind of a fact-finding mission, trying to understand the structure and the status of nurse anesthesia in Guyana. So that was a big part of understanding the needs, just gathering information that wasn't available in a database.
So once you did gather all your information, what did you decide to do with it, and how did you come to this decision? Can you tell me a little bit about that and your project design?
Yeah, so after looking at Lonnie's research, which included some surveys, looking at the Guyanese nurse anesthetists' own self-identified needs. So starting from there, and then with conversations with practitioners in Guyana, as well as just experience in the OR, gave us the idea that simulation was a very big kind of low-hanging fruit, and crisis management was something that the Guyanese nurse anesthetists were looking for more training in. So we designed a project to address crisis management, and we did that by creating a virtual module. It could be watched asynchronously. It utilizes some active learning as preparation for eventual simulation. And this was shown to be feasible after the point-of-care ultrasound education happened down there. They preceded the in-person training with asynchronous virtual education. That was very positive, and everyone was able to complete it, and it prepared them for the time that we had together. So we created this module, and specifically looking at the crisis of hypotension in the OR. So we're looking for something that people are going to see every day. And our initial evaluation of this intervention is by reaching out to the stakeholders, key members of the community to get feedback. Eventually, once the project is fully deployed, it will be evaluated using a paired t-test for individuals before and after viewing the module, and then at 6 months and 1 year to test for durability of effect. The main measure will be to measure confidence in providing safe care during crises.
Jonathan, can you tell our listeners why you chose hypotension as the topic for the scenario?
So we chose hypotension because it is something very common. It also has a complicated physiology that can come. There's many etiologies for hypotension, and it is a good kind of proof of case to work through a differential and to think critically. So especially when people are dealing with severe hypotension, it can be a very stressful event, and choosing the correct intervention is very important. So this gave the opportunity to think on multiple levels, and is also very amenable to simulation.
Absolutely. So in the process of creating your project, did you need to survey participants? And if so, what ethical considerations or consent did you provide for your survey?
So we did survey the stakeholders for the Guyanese nurse anesthetists. They're developing a master's program. So this year is the second year of their bachelor's program, and in hopes of deploying the master's program in the future. So as they prepare for that, they'll need continuing education and other professional requirements for licensure. So we, through Dr. Evans, have discussed, how to deploy this, making sure that it's kind of culturally relevant, that it's that it looks at the education level of the nurses now and advancing that education towards the use of evidence-based practice in Guyana. So the survey, there were no real ethical concerns. All the participants had an opportunity to sign consent before they participated in the events. So when they looked through the PowerPoint slides that we had prepared, and then they commented on the appropriateness and the evidence-based nature of the information that we had developed for the module.
Were there any findings on the survey that surprised you or anything you want to comment on?
I don't think there was anything surprising. They did comment that the limited resources was probably the significant barrier to deployment of a kind of a virtual based education system. So we need to look more into that and make sure that they have access to computers and internet in order to deploy kind of a CMA style education platform.
Jonathan, after being there before, did that feedback surprise you?
Sorry about that.
Okay.
It not really. I mean, scarcity of resources was something that we did expect to be a potential issue. And it's a low resource country. I was impressed when I went there how effective they were in utilizing distance education, and that gave me confidence that a virtual module could be effective. They do deal with a lot of resource challenges, in the hospital and in the educational environment. I know they do have a lot of support to grow through that with people, key members of the community interested in creating a simulation lab. I would like to drill down a little bit more on what specifically those limitations people are mentioning about scarcity of resources is, because it could mean multiple things, but that's something we're going to pursue as the project goes forward.
Absolutely. I think that's pretty amazing. And based on the feedback of your content, did your group need to make any changes to your project at all?
No, not necessarily. But again, the survey was to the stakeholders themselves. So we'll continue to work with them in developing the actual presentation. But I think as it stands, it was well received, and something that they perceive as a stepping stone to getting to the point of implementing an actual simulation lab where they can really get kind of in the weeds, if you will, with
Right.
kind of some of the education requirements.
Right. Absolutely. So Jonathan, what would you say is the biggest takeaway from the project?
So just kind of where we're at in the project, making specific conclusions to this specific intervention, this module that we made, is a little bit hard to say with any confidence. But things that I can say confidently, it is feasible to design educational modules to be deployed virtually in Guyana. It's been done, and it can be done again. Whether what we created is effective or not could be dependent on the creators and not the actual model. So we'll see how that goes. And then, I've been impressed, throughout my experience in Guyana and throughout this project with the understanding that the Guyanese nurse anesthetists and the trainees in the current bachelor's program very motivated to advance their practice, and they're good partners. And I think going forward, just continuing to have a dialogue to understand that what we're offering is meeting their needs is going to be really important.
Absolutely. Shane, did you want to touch on any of that or comment?
I think the most important thing to remember is as we become a more connected community, even low resource settings will have the opportunity to implement evidence-based practice kind of in a more rapid fashion. And if we have the opportunity to share that knowledge, that will increase the rapidity with which they are able to implement that in their practices. So it was a lot of fun to kind of go through this project and recognize some of the growth that we've had as a profession and how we can share that growth and some of the stepping, the barriers and blocks that we've had to help them advance maybe a little bit faster than we have even.
Absolutely. I think a project like this is something to be proud of because it's bigger than just MTSA. It's bigger than just earning your doctorate degree, It's even bigger than growing our profession in the United States. You're crossing countries here and now helping Guyanese nurse anesthetists to grow their profession as well and their degree. So I think that's something to be commended. And I think it's amazing too to see how you could maybe take this project, the structure of it, the virtual module, to benefit their education and to offer evidence-based teaching and training to a low-income country that may not have the resources right there, but you could adopt this to other countries as well, right? So again, your project can be a model for other projects. And so it's much, much bigger than just MTSA or just nurse anesthetists. It can be a global pattern for spreading evidence-based nurse anesthesia practice and disseminating information in a very effective way until they can increase their own resources. So I think it's something to be really proud of what you guys have done. I don't know if you've thought of it on that level yet. I'm sure you maybe have. This, this is your baby, your project. So was there anything else you wanted our listeners to know or other fellow doctorate students or anything else about your project you wanted to touch on before we wrap it up?
I'd just say, echoing what you're mentioning, this, our vision was for this to be a proof of concept that could be replicated. The ultimate vision would be for a portfolio of these modules to be developed and to proceed in-person simulation, and eventually, working to become hands-off, and eventually the Guyanese nurse anesthetists will be making their own modules. And then I hadn't really thought about expanding to other countries, but if this works, that would be great. So we'll see how the intervention works. And the last thing, I'll just kind of echo what I've been saying, is that the Guyanese nurse anesthesia community, it's a solid community. I'm excited, I'm kind of privileged to be a part of them. And I'm excited to see what they do on their own and, add wherever it's possible, wherever I have something to give.
Absolutely.
It's been fun to kind of get to know them a little bit and some of the struggles that they've had in developing their own profession. And, as we continue to even become more national here in the United States, we're going to end up becoming more global. So some of the standards that other countries have will be adopted here and vice versa. So it's my program director would always say, it's a small community in anesthesia. And even though we're going global, it's still a small community, and we'll learn from each other.
Absolutely. And MTSA has had a very strong relationship with the Guyanese School of Anesthesia. So I think this will only strengthen it and show what we can do with this type of technology and resources that we have to share for now. So thank you guys so much for talking about your project. I think it's a project very well done, and I'm really excited to see what the future brings for it. I'm also, I know you guys are as well, grateful to Lonnie, who has kind of paved the way for this. She is a staple in this project, and also grateful to Dr. Hallie Evans, who also is the director of our doctorate completion program and spearheads this project as well. So you guys did a fantastic job, and thank you so much for talking to me today.